As more and more begin to know, the status quo has got to go. They're bound to say yes to a man named Dr. No, a man who makes the establishment panic. Grassroots are growing way too wild, too organic.
So this is Representative Andy Harris. He is a Republican from Maryland and a co-chair of the Congressional Ukraine Caucus. He said this week that he's not sure if the Ukraine war is winnable and called for the U.S. to pressure Zelensky to pursue peace talks. So Harris is also a member of the Freedom Caucus, which is interesting because the Freedom Caucus, it's about 50 House Republicans, and a lot of them, many of them, have been opposed to funding the Ukraine war this whole time and, voted against the initial aid packages, but not Harris, because again, he's a member of the Ukraine Caucus, very pro-Ukraine. He's been a staunch supporter of this proxy war against Russia. So to see him say things like this is very interesting. So this was at a town hall on Tuesday night. It was reported by Politico, and he said that it seems like it's more of a stalemate and that the U.S. should be realistic about the situation. When discussing the counteroffensive, he said, quote, "I'll be blunt, it's failed," end quote. And he said he's not sure if the war is winnable anymore. His comments are a sign that the new $24 billion Ukraine aid package that the White House has requested, won't receive as much support as previous packages have. I think it's going to be more difficult for it to pass. Unfortunately, I'm kind of pessimistic about this. I don't think the opposition is going to be enough to stop it because, every Democrat I haven't seen any dissent from Democrats, and there's still enough Republicans that support it. The problem, I think McCarthy, the House Speaker, is going to have some issues because of the way I understand it, that the Rules Committee and some of these Republicans that are against continuing this proxy war, they can do some legislative, maneuvers to make things difficult. So I think it might be delayed and it might be a headache for McCarthy, but I think ultimately they'll probably pass it. But again, this is just interesting for someone like this to be saying. So the Biden administration is considering ways to maintain its military presence in Niger following the July 26th coup that ousted President Mohamed Bazoum. Niger serves as a platform for U.S. operations in the Sahel region as it hosts about 1,100 troops and a major drone base that cost over $100 million to build, known as Air Base 201. So the U.S. has not formally declared the situation in Niger a coup, since that would require cutting off aid and other types of support to the Nigerian military. CNN reported Thursday that one option being considered to maintain the U.S. military presence in the country is issuing a waiver to allow U.S. operations to continue in Niger if a coup determination is made. So they're considering, I don't know. They could just issue a waiver for anything, I guess. And then the New York Times also reported something similar. They said another option for the administration would be to stop short of declaring a coup and working out an arrangement with the junta to continue counterterrorism support. So they're thinking about just, cooperating with the post-coup government. Because, all the talk about caring about democracy, that's out of the window if, we're talking about having to give up a big drone base and a big military presence in West Africa. So many of the Niger junta leaders have received training from the United States and have a long history of cooperating with the U.S. military, including Brigadier General Moussa Barmou, who has proclaimed himself Niger's new defense chief. Barmou worked closely with U.S. Special Operations Forces over the years, and according to CNN sources, he's kept in touch with several current and former U.S. officials, so he's a friend of the United States. And so far, the junta has not asked the U.S. to leave the country. And it's expected that the U.S. could cooperate with the coup leaders if it chooses to. So this is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. The White House has signed off on Israel selling its advanced air defense system to Germany. The Arrow 3 is a joint U.S.-Israeli weapon system that Berlin will purchase for $3.5 billion from Tel Aviv. So the Israeli Defense Ministry announced the sale on Thursday, saying that the agency has received Washington's approval. So this is a huge arms sale for Israel. This is their largest ever. And the Arrow 3 air defense system was developed jointly by Israel Aerospace Industries and Boeing. The missile system is designed to work at higher altitudes outside of the atmosphere than other American air defense systems such as the Patriot or Aegis. And I know that some of the U.S. aid that they provide Israel, $3.3 billion of it is foreign military financing, which is money that they give to foreign governments to buy U.S. weapons. And then $500 million that they get every year is for missile defense systems like the Iron Dome and like this Arrow 3. So some U.S. aid could have gone into developing this, and now they're making a killing selling it. This is another one from the Libertarian Institute from Connor Freeman. Berlin has backed off its plan to legally commit itself to meeting NATO's 2% yearly military spending target. So The German finance minister's new budget was passed by the parliament after a clause pledging to meet the target was deleted at the last minute. Instead, in keeping with Berlin's national security strategy, it will maintain its policy to aim for 2% spending of GDP on an average over a 5-year period. So this is a thing that NATO's been pushing its members to spend 2% of its GDP on its military, and a lot of them aren't doing it. And it's interesting because Germany is, one of the biggest NATO countries, the biggest economy in Europe, and this is a big gripe that Trump had with Germany, and kind of something conservatives complain a lot about, is that we have over 30,000 troops there. We're responsible for their defense. They should spend more on their military. I personally don't care how much Germany spends on its military. I think we should just get out of there anyway. But I understand that grievance. It kind of makes sense.
Truth is the basis of trust. It's the basis of our relationships with each other, whether it's man and wife or friends or even in the commercial sector. Truth is the basis of everything that we do. Truth is now being tortured. Truth itself is on trial, and I think we all know that. And I think authoritarian societies, the first thing, of course, they target is truth. The ruling power maintains a monopoly on truth in authoritarian societies. Think of the Orwell's 2 + 2 = 5. That is what they enforce. The new Soviet man, the Aryan Superman in a 1,000-year Reich, they feel they have the monopoly on truth, and truth is not open for debate. It's not open for the scientific method. It's not welcome. What is truth in these kinds of societies? It's what the people with the power to crush you tell you is truth. Truth is malleable in the hands of ambitious, amoral, power-hungry individuals. And let's look through a couple of the most important ones. Of course, we started with Russiagate in 2015 and 2016. We were told that none, no less than Vladimir Putin himself, decided that he wanted to have Donald Trump elected, and he did everything he could to make that happen. Well, many of us didn't believe it at the time, regardless of how we feel about Russia or Vladimir Putin, because it just sounded dumb. Why would they do that? It didn't make any sense. And of course, we fought back, and we were called Trump supporters and right-wingers, whatever you want to call us. But the Durham report told us, and we'll hear more from Peter Van Buren on that as well, it proved to us step by step that this was an FBI operation in collusion with another candidate, Hillary Clinton at the time, to get Hillary Clinton elected. The election was stolen, but it wasn't by Trump and Putin, it was by someone else. And then came COVID in 2020. You're all gonna die. Don't take anything for it but remdesivir in a vent. That's your ticket out of here. And get your shot, especially the kids. That's what we were told. Well, of course, that was debunked as a lie, and many of us at the time saw it as such. And let me just show you something from a couple of items on that have come out just recently. And Dr. Paul and I were going to talk about this on the show, maybe we will next week. Researchers retracked over 300 COVID-era medical papers for scientific errors and ethical concerns. But then we came to January 6th. Of course, the great insurrection. The election being stolen by Trump and Putin and his cronies. Well, the video surveillance has been released. We've seen some of it. And from what we've seen so far, we haven't seen who planted those pipe bombs. I wonder why. But from what we have seen, it looks a lot more like Nancy Pelosi colluding with the Capitol Hill cops to do a cook-up, to do a fake insurrection. But I think the biggest one we're facing now, the biggest lie, of course, is Ukraine. And it's biggest, I think, primarily because the others were horrible. But now we're facing World War III. We're facing a real possibility of World War III. So the lies about Ukraine, a plucky democracy. The idea, of course, is a neocon, and I use that term broadly, meaning neoliberals and neocons, the warmongers, to overthrow Russia, which is what they've wanted to do for decades. And now they think they've gotten their chance, but as always, they've botched it. Botching it when it comes to Iraq was bad. 1 million innocent people died. Botching it when it comes to taking on Russia and overthrowing their government is orders of magnitude worse because they have nuclear weapons. So, of course, we know that Ukraine was no plucky democracy. The church is outlawed, opposition media is outlawed, the opposition party is outlawed. Now, this may be an ideal democracy for Washington, right? where all opposition is outlawed, but for those of us who are normal, that's not really the great democracy. We've been lied to all along. It goes back to the founding of this country in some ways. All wars are cooked up and based on lies, except for wars of defense. But something new has happened here, and I think that's what's so important. We did talk about it on the Libra Report, but all of a sudden, at least as far as we can tell, the state has partnered with the private sector to bypass the Constitution. The state is not in because we have the Bill of Rights, thank God. The state can't say, hey, you can't say that. So what do? They go to Google, they go to Twitter, they go to Facebook and Instagram and say, hey, you tell them they can't say that. Well, we don't want to do that. Well, you're going to be in trouble. We're going to drag you up before Congress again, and someone's going to yell at you, and you're going to have all sorts of other problems. So this is how they've been able to bypass the Constitution, and that's an enormous danger to all of us. And that's why you have a phrase coined by Mike Schellenberger. He calls it the censorship industrial complex. And I think it's a terrific, terrific way of expressing what we're talking about. This is his congressional testimony. He said, in his 1961 farewell address, President Dwight Eisenhower warned of the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex. That was a quote. Eisenhower feared that the size and power of the complex or cluster of government contractors and the Department of Defense would, quote, endanger our liberties or democratic processes, end quote. How? Through, quote, domination of the nation's scholars by federal employment, project allocations, and the power of money, end quote. He feared public policy would, quote, become the captive of a scientific technological elite, end quote. Eisenhower's fears were well-founded. Today, American taxpayers are unwittingly financing the growth and power of a censorship industrial complex run by America's scientific and technological elite, which endangers our liberties and democracy. Importantly, the bar for bringing in military-grade government monitoring and speech countering techniques has moved from countering terrorism, remember that, to countering extremism, to countering simple misinformation. The government no longer needs a predicate of calling you a terrorist or extremist to deploy government resources to counter your political activity. The only predicate it needs is simply the assertion that the opinion you expressed on social media is wrong. That's the danger we face. Thank you very much.
So on this day in 1971, Richard Nixon took the country off the gold standard, and when he announced that he just announced that he was temporarily suspending the convertibility of dollars into gold. And I just find this to be so interesting. So this is actually what inspired Ron Paul to run for Congress, because he had studied enough Austrian economics that he knew that like this would usher in the age of big government. Because when you don't have a reserve standard for your money, there's nothing to check government from printing as much money as they can, and of course all of the incentives are for politicians to do so. Like, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they want to buy up votes and not have to raise taxes and be able to just kick it off into the future? It allows them to do deficit financing. It allows them to fight wars that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to get away with if they had to tax people. You know what I mean?
Well, I think that video does kind of showcase the lunacy of this whole thing, and what the Democrats will yell about. And back then, what they were yelling about, I believe, with the Bill Barr thing was that they were going to open up the Durham investigation, which was actually the cover-up for the deep state working against Donald Trump. And what's interesting about the Georgia case, all the other cases are complete.
This is the new indictment for
the new indictment.
Yes,
the previous indictments, they're all nonsense. I mean, even just the fact that they have to use novel legal theories is proof of the fact that they're not just following the letter of the law and applying it. That it's literally, those two things are contradictory. Like their claims that they were trying to make of, well, we're just going to follow the law wherever it leads, and we would prosecute anyone like this. Well, no, if you're using novel legal theories, that's by definition not what you're doing.
Right.
All the other cases are complete and total nonsense. The Georgia case just happened today. I don't have every single detail on this. This one's actually interesting because it's looking into whether or not they really did engage in some dirty tactics to actually undermine the last election. The problem is even with the least charitable view of what Donald Trump did, let's say there was zero election shenanigans in the last go-around, which now you get all these stories going on right now of this pipe burst, and we saw all the counts that happened on election night. I watched I watched a lot of time of certification videos of people giving report after report of shady information, and then them going certified, and then on the next day on the news going, well, this county was certified. It was Bugs Bunny tricks that I talked about, people going out for lunch, and then all of a sudden they're locked out of the building. But let's just say there was zero shadiness whatsoever. Zero. I don't know how you possibly prove illegal behavior, because you had to change. Like, if Donald Trump actually sat around and thought, okay, there's this legal loophole here of the way that our elections are done, and if I can just, drum up enough court cases to say that this was fraudulent, well, then I might be able to change the electors and just win. Let's just say, but what illegal behavior did he engage in if he actually had a bad loophole on the books? And that's the least charitable definition. I'm saying if you just delete all of the fraud that existed, and then when he's calling down to Georgia to inspect equipment, like, what did they do? Are you trying to say that they were actually changing the votes on the equipment? Like, what legal sanctity did they violate if they had suspicions of a machine? Or what did they violate if they go, hey, I actually think that there's a lot of fraud here, but I only need you to find this much fraud. I don't need you to find all the fraud. Like, I just see a hard time, and I'm not saying that a jury can't be convinced otherwise, but it just seems to me that once you're backdooring, racketeering or whatever the fuck else, it's like, what specifically do you think he did that was actually illegal? And I don't think there's anything that you're going to be able to prove.
overwhelmingly obvious that he broke the law. And you would think that would have to be the standard in order to kind of like interfere in the political process like this and break the precedent of the, like, we don't go after former administrations legally, because that is banana republic type territory. Like that whole norm, however you feel about it, that's being broken. And in all of these indictments, there's not one, including this Georgia one, where it's like obvious that he committed a crime. You still kind of have to go like, even in their strongest one, it's a bit of a gray area. And in the other, all the other ones, it's just like, this is ridiculous. And you see it all coming together like that. I mean, for anybody who's not just kind of like possessed by Trump derangement syndrome, I think everybody else can kind of see, even if you don't like Donald Trump, you can admit, you know, as two people here who don't particularly like Donald Trump can admit that it's like, yes, but also I don't like him. And also the CIA doesn't like him. And not for the same reasons. You know, we are investigating Hunter Biden. I guess that's not such a crazy thing anymore. I guess Donald Trump trying to use the Justice Department against the family of his political opponents, it's like, oh no, all right. Even his father's Justice Department even had to admit there's something there. But of course, the other thing that I always throw out with these, and we'll see, I could be wrong about this, but I've been talking about this for months now, but the more heat you start seeing coming down on Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, the more you got to ask yourself, are they making their move finally? Are they finally making their move to try to get him out? I don't know. But you have to think about that.
I'll keep it real short, but the special counsel seems to be the cover-up, and that they had a plea deal worked out that included other charges, him not being able to be prosecuted for other charges. The judge basically looked in and said, is that even legal? Like, how do you get rid of other charges that have nothing to do with this? And so that fell apart after 3 hours. Now, suddenly, the Justice Department goes, oh, we're going to do a special prosecutor instead. And from all of the reports from the whistleblowers, I can't speak to this specific special prosecutor, but the reports from the whistleblower was essentially the prosecutors in the Justice Department undermining their investigation, of even giving them tips about warrants that would be on properties and otherwise. So it would seem to me like suddenly this special prosecutor is to basically go, oh yeah, well that's an ongoing investigation, so it's something that can't be discussed during the election cycle because they weren't able to actually put a button on it and wrap it up and go, oh look, that was that went away and it was just a tax whatever event. Yeah, well, just to be clear, if my conspiracy speculation is correct, which, by the way, you raise a very good point, but the goal would never be to prosecute Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. That's not the way they would ever want to do this. They don't want to destroy their own credibility by like humiliating and admitting criminality of the person they've been championing for the last few years. What they want to do is have that dirt there, let them know that they could get them, and then get them to concede everything that they want.
Here's Gerald Celente with today's trends in the news.
Investors are wagering that the Fed may be done raising rates, but also further away from any cuts. And again, you see what the mortgage rates are now, they're over 7%. Over 7%. So people don't want to sell their homes because they can't afford to buy another one with such a high mortgage rate. So you got a shortage of supply, and that's what's keeping the prices up. And again, when everything was going down and the interest rates were going up, we said, no, there's not going to be a housing crisis. This isn't like the panic of 2008 when they had all those fake subprime mortgages. Hey, you don't have a job? You're deep in debt? They just took your car because you couldn't pay the debt on that? You got a load of credit card debt? Don't worry about it. Sign over here. You could buy a house. Yeah. And then the bigs, the Blackstones, bought them all up as these other people went all broke when the panic of 2008 hit. We are on the same course as that. And then oil prices are still up there. They're still around there, the $85 a barrel for Brent crude. Gold went down. The crypto party's over for a while. The juice has gone out of it. Where is it going to go? It got to go back above the $30,000 a Bitcoin for it to go higher. If it starts sinking, if it hits the 15,000 level, we're saying bye-bye. It's going to go way down, Bitcoin. And gold, of course, is taking a hit because the dollar is getting strong. I mean, it's end of story. When they start lowering interest rates, gold prices are going to go up. And now they're saying they might not even lower interest rates. But gold prices are still going to go up because we're looking at the geopolitical situation, and it's rotten. So Wall Street gets key role in chip revival. $39 billion. Since the passage of the bipartisan crime syndicate's passage of a bill, Chips and Science last summer, the Commerce Department is quietly building a small team, you ready, of elite Wall Street financiers to help allocate $39 billion in taxpayer-funded manufacturing subsidies. They steal our money. And isn't that a nice word? How? small team of elite Wall Street financiers. Elite. They're elite. They're Wall Street financiers. They're members of the club. It's the Wall Street gang. Got it? Or as George Carlin said, one big club and you ain't in it. I'm saying Mussolini called this fascism, the merger of state and corporate powers. NATO will support Ukraine until it wins, said that arrogant little boy, Stoltenberg. Hey, Gen Z boy, go over there and fight or shut your mouth. Anybody that supports the war, go over there and fight or zip it up. Don't want to hear it. And send your money, don't want mine. Speaking to Norwegian media, prostitutes, Stoltenberg said NATO's priority, quote, is to support Ukraine militarily, adding that, quote, if you want a lasting just peace, then military support for Ukraine is the way to get there. There is no doubt about it. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. No doubt about it. Who the fuck would believe the shit spewed? I got to be careful. He's the head of the NATO. Thank God. Oh. Here's an article here. Utility knew wildfire threat, but waited for years to act. We wrote about this in the Trends Journal when the same thing was happening in California. The utility companies, what the hell are they doing with power lines above the ground? Well, you should be burying these things. Look at the destruction that's been caused. And now they're going to wipe out the little people. And the bigs are going to take over more. It's the same thing in East Palestine. Here's a story in the New York Times. After a toxic train wreck, illness, exile, and debt. This is the America that could send, that was about $130 billion already to Ukraine and give chump change to the people in East Palestine, Ohio, and Maui and the other city that's been wrecked. And there's this video of this guy, and he's really angry.
If they can freaking take care of Ukraine, yeah, $40 billion go to Ukraine. Fucking shit ain't coming to us. What the fuck? My tax paying money for 60 fucking years don't mean shit. But they will take care of Ukraine, 40 fucking billion. But nobody's still here to take care of us. We're suffering. All this shit we got to do on our own.
Yeah. Yeah. As I said, these politicians who you can't hate, you have to love them. He said 40 billion, and he only got the first number coming out when they voted that for, going a year ago almost. It's almost it's over 130 billion now. Going back to Scott Ritter. They took him off for hate speech. This guy doesn't speak hate speech. I mean, what's hate speech? If I hate something, I'm not allowed to say it. And Scott Ritter is not like that. He's not. He's very, very polite. I'm only supposed to hate who the government tells me to hate. I can't hate who I want to hate. I can't believe in St. Thomas Aquinas about being angry. That if you're not angry when it's morally just to be angry, you are immoral.